This is a new Camry that's been launched today. As you can see, it's actually the same, basically the same model as the one that was launched in 2018 because it's still the same 8th generation of the Camry. But being a facelift, as we call it, there's a new grille and there's this new thing here to give it a wider look. And of course new wheels, and at the back the tail lights have a little bit of redesign with some smoked lens. But the big story of this Camry is that it has an engine change, which is very unusual because normally engine changes will occur when there's a new generation, but not usually while the generation is still in production. And this new engine is called the dynamic force engine, which is a really new development that was done together with the Toyota New Global Architecture, or what we call TNGA, that is a common platform for all the recent Toyota models. TNGA and the dynamic force engines were developed around the same time, so they are very well matched to optimize the engineering of the car. But let's take a look at the engine. This is a new 2.5 litre dynamic force engine. 2.5 litres is about the same displacement as the previous one, but this engine is a lot better because what it has is it's got probably the best thermal efficiency in the world. And thermal efficiency is what will give it more power, better consumption, lower emissions, and a general improvement in performance. Thermal efficiency basically means less losses through heat. And when you can do that, it means you have more power from the fuel to propel the car. Now, with say Formula One engines, the thermal efficiency is as high as 65%. Most engines today are at about 20% at the most. Toyota has managed to make this dynamic force engine have a thermal efficiency of 40%. So it's probably one of the best in the world for a production engine. And besides the engine, they've also put in a new direct shift automatic transmission. This is an 8-speeder compared to the previous one, which was a 6-speeder. And with additional gear ratios, obviously the transition between gears is smoother and you get smoother operation as well. And there are other things that have been done to the transmission and the powertrain to reduce friction, to increase efficiency, and generally to increase output. So the dynamic force engine is going to be around for a while, and from what we have found in our drive, it actually does make a difference to the performance of the car. Okay, we're inside the Camry now, and as you can see, it's got all the elements that make it a very ideal executive sedan with all the features that an owner would want. The basic layout is still the same as before, but they've improved it by changing the materials, which are a bit more premium to my eye. Well, some of the new features that they've added into this Camry are things like a tri-zone air conditioning system. So what's that? You've probably heard of dual zone, which is where the passenger and the driver can have individual temperatures. Now, tri-zone means that the passengers at the back can also set their own temperature from the back. So there will be 3 different areas of temperature to suit requirements of the occupant, which is pretty good because then you don't have the front passenger saying it's too cold or it's too hot, and everyone's happy and the journey is more enjoyable. I'll show you that tri-zone thing at the back later. The instrument panel, what I like about Toyota instrument panels these days is that they use these optitron meters, which are bright and very sharp. Optitron meters were originally developed a long time back for Lexus models, which, as you know, are the is a luxury brand of Toyota, and now they are using it in Toyota models, and it's very bright and sharp under all lighting conditions, so it makes it easy on the eye. Additionally, including this instrument panel, there's a head-up display as well, which is projected on the screen ahead. That's pretty useful, and from what you can't see it from there, but from what I can see is it's pretty clear under all kinds of lighting conditions. I've come across some head-up displays where in bright light you can't see it, but I find that this one is pretty good. It is good for people of different heights as well. The last part of the Toyota Safety Sense system, actually it's not part of the Toyota Safety Sense system, but one of the driver assistance systems is intelligence clearance sonar, which is now available on the Camry, and it also uses the 4 sensors around the front and rear sensors to detect whether there's a wall or there's another object that you can bump into and damage the car. Now, this intelligence clearance sonar will also activate the brakes if you are too close to the object and prevent damage that will spoil the nice paintwork on this car. So, as a package, Toyota Safety Sense system helps the driver to avoid accidents, and with automatic emergency braking and things like that, if the accident does have to happen, it can reduce the severity of the accident, because automatic emergency braking will start the braking earlier than a driver normally would, and by the time you actually hit the other car, the speed will be lower, so the damage should be less, hopefully, and the repair costs will be lower. Okay, now let's look at the back of the Camry, and as you can see, there's lots of space, which is what you'd expect of a executive sedan in this class. A lot of headroom, a lot of width, and a lot of leg room. And we should actually thank the guys at Toyota USA for such a large area, because back in 1990, when they were developing the first Camry, actually it was a 3rd generation Camry, because the Camry first came out in Japan in 1982, but it's the 3rd generation that most of the world knows about, because that's the one, the model that is called the XV10, that became the 2nd world car for Toyota after the Corolla. And at that time, they were going to have a new model or model change in America for the 3rd generation. And the guys in Toyota USA went to Japan to see the final design, which was approved for production. When they saw it, they immediately rejected it because it was almost the same as before. It was a typical Japanese mid-size sedan that had a lot of straight lines, and it just looked typically Japanese. I'm not sure how I can explain that, but it was very conservative, and they refused to accept it, and they said that Americans would not like it. It was also narrow, because in Japan there were regulations at that time that limited the width of the cars due to their narrow city roads. So these guys from Toyota USA said that they would never be able to get Americans to buy lots of the next Camry if it was going to look like that. And at that time, Lexus had just been launched. If you remember, Lexus, the luxury brand, had been launched in 1989, and it was really an overnight success. It introduced a new level of customer satisfaction to the American market, but that's a different story. I'll tell you sometime. So these guys in Toyota USA refused to accept the design, and of course the chief engineer and chief designer were unwilling to accept their rejection, and because all the work had been done, all the engineering work had been done. But the interesting thing is, top management, the two Toyotas who ran the company, A.G. Toyoda and Dr. Shoichiro Toyoda, supported the US guys, and they said they ordered the chief engineer and his designer to go back and redesign the Camry, which was very unusual, because once the final design has been approved, it's usually ready to go into production. They wouldn't waste more time on redesigning it because they are very strict on schedules, and Toyota usually will stick to a schedule whatever happens. So this was a very unusual thing, but of course the chief engineer had to follow the instructions of the big boss. And I think some months later, when the next design was shown again, it was sort of like a smaller version, or a version of the Lexus LS400, which was the successfully introduced flagship of the Lexus brand. And I guess that maybe the designer, having been told that the Americans love the Lexus design, he used many elements of it. So that Camry, which you will remember came to Malaysia in 1994 or 1995, was exactly what they wanted. It was larger, it was wider, and it was more modern looking. And they were right. The Toyotas were right to support them, because that design made the Camry so popular that it would become the best-selling car in America, and it would keep being the best-selling car in America for 20 consecutive years, which is really impressive when you think about it, because America was the largest car market in the world. It's been overtaken by China, so it's the second largest car market, and it's a very competitive market. So to be able to be the best-selling passenger car there is quite an achievement, and Toyota, being a foreign brand, is an even bigger achievement because they've got their own domestic brands. So because of that original insistence on making the Camry wider, today we've got this model that is so spacious and so comfortable behind that it's really a luxurious sort of car. And I'm sure that a lot of executives will enjoy sitting behind, especially in this new one, which has adjustable seats, power adjustable seats, to get a more comfortable seating position. In Malaysia and much of Asia, the Camry is treated as more of a chauffeur-driven car, I think. Whereas in America, it's the owner will drive the car themselves. So Toyota has given a lot of attention to the back seat comfort and the features in the back seat. For example, as I said earlier, they've given the back passengers the possibility of also controlling their own temperature, and you can see it down here in this center console, which we'll take a close-up of later. Mentioned earlier, there's a tri-zone climate control system which allows the rear passengers to control their own temperature, and they can control it from this panel here which really looks like it came out of a luxury model, like a Lexus model. It's something that really looks good, and you don't see the buttons when it's off, and you just press the button and look at that. Isn't that really nice? So, and it has controls for the seat to go up and down. The rear backrest can recline 8 degrees, by the way, and radio controls. You can control the channel and the track and the volume up front, and then the temperature, of course. So unfortunately it's not for each occupant, but it's a step. Maybe in future they'll give it for each occupant as well, so we can change higher or lower temperature, which will be different from what is set at the front. And I think this is really impressive for a car in this class at this time, because you only find this feature in more expensive models.